Members, full and test drive. Have you seen what's going on this site? I'm so excited. I have built more new videos in the last 2 weeks than I swear to God I have in the last 2 to 4 months. This new system I have is incredible. We have a bunch of new stuff for you. If you don't know yet, I have a new partner, Brian Rutledge, who is a law enforcement pilot. He's one of our members who did his instructor rating with me, helped him online. We've remained friends ever since. And he's been kind of helping me a little bit, over time and checking in on me in the site. And we finally just decided that, he wants to jump in full bore. He's building some downloads for you which I've taken in turn and shot them and turned them into videos. And downloads, those are in the download section. A lot of cool stuff going on there. And I just redesigned the site. And what I want to point out to you, when you log in, it's going to look different. Most of us don't like change, but I think you're going to like this. The welcome tab hasn't changed. Live's still in place. But 1 through 10, that's the original modules 1 through 10. That's now organized, so you can click that tab, go right through the 1 through 10. Then we have private tab. Under the private is the practical test standards. All 10 sections you can click on and work through step by step. Commercial section, commercial stuff is underneath there. Then the CFI section, Certified Flight Instructor. There's your aircraft tab. There's your downloads, and community still there. So even though the look is a little bit different, on the back end, this was very hard for me to navigate inside the site and work on it. And I know that you as members, you probably struggled a lot with clicking the different tabs, and I know it was kind of a mess. I really like the way it's set up now. It's going to be easier for me to work with. It's going to be easier for you to navigate. We're still waiting on the new system to come in, and I was kind of dragging my feet waiting for the new site to arrive, and quite frankly, I can't wait anymore. You guys are probably tired of waiting. So, redesigned site, private, commercial, CFI. The original modules 1 through 10, my original training. For those of you that like it, want to go through it, the random training, it's still there and intact. You can go through 1 through 10. If you want to take the newer training, the private pilot practical test standards, you can just go right to that tab and work right through it. Same thing with commercial, same thing with CFI, then your aircraft tab, and then the downloads. So look around. There's new videos in every single section, private, commercial, CFI, downloads, and there's going to be a lot more. Trust me, the speed I've gained just in the last few weeks with this new system, honestly, before a 15-minute presentation would take me 8 to 12 hours to build. Believe it or not, with the way I did things. Now a 15-minute video I can do in probably about 2 hours. Again, depending on, is the presentation ready? But the speed I've picked up is just unbelievable. So I'm thrilled with all the new equipment, the new speed, the new products. Brian joining the team. Brian has 30 years in aviation. He's the chief flight instructor for his aviation unit, chief pilot, nice guy, smart as a whip, very knowledgeable instructor, and he likes teaching. He's like me. He's passionate about it, and so he's jumping in full bore, and I'm going to not spoil it and tell you what other things he's got planned that he's working on right now, but we'll be announcing those very soon. It's cool stuff that you're going to like, trust me. So I'm going to cut back now to a video that's the welcome video I put up just a couple weeks ago where I talk about the FAR aim manual and the different tools of the trade, things that you need to be using for your study materials. I just wanted to break in with this and let you know it is September 10th, I believe, and I just was so excited about the changes I had to cut in here and let you know about the changes. So look around the site, start clicking through it, leave comments, put comments below, let me know what you're thinking. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you to all of you. This thing just keeps getting better, and I'm still loving coming to work every day and just loving building new presentations. So start clicking around the site and let me know what you think. I'm Kenny Keller, the creator of Helicopter Online Ground School. Welcome to the Welcome tab, the welcome video. Real quick, I'm going to talk through some of the changes I've made here recently to the site, and here very shortly, I'm going to go through a list of what I think is the things you're going to need for private pilot, commercial pilot, certified flight instructor, things at a minimum. I get this question a lot from people, whether they're brand new or maybe been flying a while. Well, what do I really need? What are the minimum books? So I'm going to cover that here in just a minute. So this is the introduction video on the Welcome tab. Below here, below this video, you can read about our recent member Check-Ride success for those of you that are new or existing members. Feedback is below for recent Check-Rides. We have a new tab for live events. We're kicking this up. I've done live events in the past. A lot of you have seen them. And typical with live events, you know, there's lots of technical issues. And in the past, I had somewhat slow internet speed. I've used some different software. And hopefully the ones that we're getting ready to do now are going to be the best live events that we've ever had. So go to the live events tab to check out dates and times. Give me your feedback. We'll get these rolling and see how they go. So there are several sections underneath the Check-Ride preparation tab. We have the original modules 1 through 10, which is random Check-Ride preparation based on my notebook. A lot of people still love the original modules 1 through 10. It's random training through my notebook where I just go through and cover things that you're going to need to know. New people like it, but a lot of add-on guys, people doing add-on ratings, or somebody's been studying for a while and they just kind of want questions or things thrown at them to kind of test their knowledge and see where they're at. So you can go to the welcome video that explains that more in detail in the modules 1 through 10. And we went live March 1st, 2012 with that. And over time, some people would say, well, hey, you know, I'd like something more structured. So we built then the practical test standards. That is also underneath the Check-Ride tab. So the practical test standards is going through the PTS, FAA PTS, practical test standards, step by step. So for those of you wanting something more in a step-by-step fashion, you can work through the practical test standards. There's a new welcome video on that section to help explain that a little more in detail, how that works. Underneath the Check-Ride preparation tab, there's also a commercial pilot section. We have 4 new videos or 5 new videos that we've added to the commercial pilot section. So for those of you working on your commercial, you can go to that section to get some direction on where to go and how to study. Then we have the aircraft specific modules that we're working on and continuing to build on. And we have certified flight instructor section that I'm updating and working on as well. So lots of new changes. I'm really excited about everything that's going on. This new software is killer. The new live events is going to be awesome. Bear with me as we get those going. But the thing I have learned over time, a lot of the things that I do now, I have learned through live events, watching other people that do this sort of thing. And even the gurus occasionally have technical problems. So that's all part of it. So now let's get to some of the resources. Going to kind of give you a disclaimer. These are the things that I use at minimum. There are tons of resources out there. You're welcome to use anything that you want. I'm not saying you have to use what I use, but for the people that have asked repeatedly, what do I like? What do I use? I'm going to show you. FAR AIM manual. This is a must. Every single one of you need an updated FAR AIM manual. I like to use both the hard copy and I also have a copy on my iPad and my iPhone, which is really nice. There's times where I really want to look through a book. There's times where you want to look something up and you're out on the road and you don't have your big FAR AIM book with you. Boom, you can look it up on the iPad or the iPhone, your smartphone. That is awesome. So the FAR AIM is a requirement. You got to have a FAR AIM. Real quick, I want to give you some tips. A lot of people don't understand that there's a suggested study list in the very beginning of the FAR AIM manual. For whatever rating you're working for, they're telling you the areas that you need to focus on. Very, very handy thing to use. And I can tell you that most things that you're going to use is going to come from Part 43, Maintenance, Part 61, Certification Pilots and Flight Instructors or Pilots and Instructors, Part 67, Medical Standards and Certification, Part 91, General Operating and Flight Rules, and 49 CFR, NTSB 830, Accident Reporting. Those are the main sections. Not saying you'll never go to another section, but when you're looking stuff up, remember, go to those areas first. If you're confused, I always take students and I take their marker and I highlight those. Most everything you're going to look up is going to be in those sections for the private level. Jeppesen Private Pilot Manual. I've had this book since the late 90s and I love this book. I still reference this book today. It's kind of expensive, but you know what? This thing has been a resource for my private, my commercial, my CFI, and I still use this today. If I'm making a presentation on something, this is one of the key resources that I will grab if I want to look up something, especially for review. And the cool thing in this book, anywhere there's a brown highlight, that's a written test question that's going to possibly come up on your written test. I love that book. Again, this is my personal opinion, what I use, what I like. E6B flight computer. I am still using my handy dandy cardboard $8 or $10 or $12 E6B flight computer. There's a steel version or a metal version that's a little more money, works just the same way. And of course, there's fancy electronic flight computers out there that you can use. Now, as far as examiners go and check rides go, just so you know, this is September 2015, and I recently posed this on a recent question with our examiner, and I said, you know, as of now, what are you doing as far as electronic devices for check rides? And he said, as of now, he's still using all the hard copy of everything. He said they will in the future start allowing different things, and he said they haven't had a lot of guidance yet on what they can and can't use. Not saying there aren't some examiners out there that are going to let you use your iPad or let you use your electronic E6B. And for those cases, that's great. You know, technology is awesome. And the electronic version saves us carrying around mounds of books. But for right now, I'm still recommending hard copy of everything. And the very cheap model cardboard E6B works just fine. You're going to need a simple plotter for doing your cross-country planning. You know, these are cheap. This one is one that's fixed and you move it. There's others you can get with the dial on them. Either one's fine. You can use either one. They both work. Again, I always like the cheap version of everything, something that's very simple. Either one of those is going to work, but you need to have one of those for working your cross-country planning. Helicopter Flying Handbook. This is a must. You must have that. I am still referencing my Rotorcraft Flying Handbook, which is still a good book. You can still use it, but the FAA has updated to the Helicopter Flying Handbook. So I have the physical copy of the Rotorcraft Flying Handbook. I do use the PDF copy of the Helicopter Flying Handbook. If I'm looking something up for a new presentation, I want to make sure that I have the wording correct, or I want to see if something's changed from this version of the book. I do go to that PDF file of the Helicopter Flying Handbook, and I use that when I'm really checking to see what they say on the latest for definitions and different things. But the books are two very similar, but the Helicopter Flying Handbook would be the updated version. So at this point, if you're working on a rating, I would most definitely get the Helicopter Flying Handbook. ASA Written Test Prep Manuals. I see it in spell written correctly. But that's okay. This presentation is going along good, and I'm not stopping now. So I personally like the ASA test prep manuals. I haven't done a rating in a long time, but I know a lot of students are still using the ASA manuals. And the reason I like these was when I was studying from all my written tests, they give you a separate workbook with your diagrams. So you can open up the one book, have the book with all the images in another book, so you can have them open together and be working through. Oh, go to figure 56. I can look over here at figure 56. Some written test prep manuals put them all together in the same book, so you're constantly moving from the front of the book to the back of the book, front of the book to the back of the book. So I like the ASA written test prep manuals. You can use whatever you want. I've also used webexams.com. I think that's still a valid website where you can go on and test yourself for free. But that's what I used, the ASA written test prep manuals. And I know a lot of guys and girls are still using those. That's what I recommend there. Pilot's Operating Handbook. This is a must as well. I can remember back when I got started and my instructor saying, just spend the 50 bucks and get your own manual. And when you're scrounging for money, you know, it's hard to do. It's hard to sometimes give up that extra 50 bucks. But I think it's well worth the time and effort. This is a 480 manual. I have a whole stack of manuals in my bookcase over there. I have a manual for pretty much everything that I fly. And if I don't fly, well, I'm going to use the 480, for example. A little over a year ago, I went and did some flight training, or not flight training, but I did some flight testing for the avionics equipment in the 480. The Aspen Avionics, they were doing the testing for the STC. Hadn't flown a 480 for a while. What did I do before I went? I got my copy out and I went through limitations, emergencies, normal procedures. I went through them on my own prior to arriving to fly the 480. So my opinion, spend the money and get your own Pilot's Operating Handbook for the aircraft that you're going to be flying, whatever that is. Next up, get a study notebook. And I'm telling you, you need to get a notebook. I just recently had an instructor tell me, yeah, I have this guy's been coming in and he won't write anything down. You know, he says he can just remember it all. You know, if you're one of those people that can remember everything, great, but more power to you. I know I sure can't. You know, you've probably heard the story about my notebook. Here it is, that beat up old notebook. I still sometimes go grab my notebook because I know exactly where things are. I still use my own notebook to this day, all these years later. You need to have a notebook where you can jot things down when you're doing ground with your instructor or you're studying at home and you have a question. You need to have your own notebook to put down your own thoughts, your own questions, the way you want to possibly explain things, or, you know, you want to make it in a manner that's meaningful to you. That's what I did with my notebook. This was never intended to become a published notebook. It was never intended to build a whole entire training section on. It was built for my own personal use. And, you know, I still remember this day when I went down to the local hardware and picked this thing up after being frustrated from my first failure and having all this stuff scattered everywhere. That's what I did. Other books, I'm sure there's tons of things out there, but you need to ask yourself, is it an FAA publication? The other one that's a must that I hinted on early, PTS. I don't care what rating you're working on, private, commercial, CFI, instrument, double I, you need to have a PTS. You need to be working through it. And I harp on it, and you'll hear this in my training, but it's true. The same, we'll use this 480 example. I went up to do this training, this flight testing, and I meet this guy up there who's an older gentleman, and he was a flight examiner for many years. And he says, well, what do you do full-time for a living? And I told him about my online ground school, and then I had now based it on the practical test standards. And this guy just, it was really neat to see his reaction. He said, Kenny, do you realize as an examiner how frustrated we get when people don't use the PTS? And I said, yeah, I have a pretty good idea. And he said, I had one guy show up for a CFI Check-Ride one time, and he said this guy had never looked at a PTS. And he said, I almost wouldn't give him the Check-Ride because he never used one. And he goes, I was pretty appalled that, you know, this guy never used a PTS. And he said, I went ahead with the Check-Ride. He goes, and the guy still did really well. He goes, and I passed him because he knew the information. He said, but I cannot imagine somebody prepping for a check ride and not using the PTS. So PTS is a must. So I mentioned FAA publication. The thing that I would say, as people ask, well, what about this book and what about that book? Is it an FAA publication? I don't want to badmouth any books because, you know, books are wonderful and books are a great thing. But when it comes to a helicopter check ride and doing helicopter training, it only makes sense that we want to use the FAA publications because that's who governs the test that we're taking. So to me, I don't really want to use anything that's not an FAA publication. I'm going to bring up Army Manual. I'm sure the Army manuals are great. If I'm in a check ride and I'm trying to relay a concept to an examiner and I'm telling him something, he says, well, where'd you get that at? Oh, that's from the Army manual. Is it valid? Maybe, possibly. You know, I don't want to dive into it. I'm just using that as an example. I'm personally not going to use the Army manual. I'm going to use the FAA publications. So I hope that helps. Those are the bare minimum things that I think a person should have. Again, you're more than welcome to use anything that you want. These are my opinions. I'm sure there's some new technology out there that blows away all my resources. But I know from talking to people, you know, I do one-on-one ground with people around the country, and they'll be at home and they'll pull up they'll show me what they have, you know. So I know they're still using a lot of them, the same things that I'm using. So again, electronic versions are cool. We know more and more through time. You know, the FAA is going to allow more of that to go on. But as far as check rides right now, in my area with my examiner, he says we're still using the hard copies. And, you know, in the future, we'll start, you know, changing that up. But as of right now, he's still requiring all the hard copies. So hope that helps. Check out the live events tab. Check around the site. Look at the other new videos. See the things we're adding. I'm so excited over the way things are working out. I continually change my setup here, and it's all for the better. Getting faster, getting smarter. Still come to work every day loving what I do. Thank you to members that have taken a chance on me. Thank you to all the members that sent in their Check-Ride testimonials. That's incredible. Thank you to the test flight customers. If you have any questions at all, put them in the box below, and we'll see you in the next video.